Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the freedom-demanding riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Yesterday, after a vote in caucus, Erin O'Toole stepped down as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Our interim leader is the Honourable Candice Bergen. I want to thank Erin for his service to our country in both his capacity as a former Canadian Armed Forces member and as leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, and for his graceful exit. Though the legacy media will try to paint our party as divided, we are fully united and hard at work for you. The left-leaning media make up categories like moderate or extreme or far right. They do this because they know the only way Trudeau can get a majority is by dividing the Conservative vote. And Canadians are tired of Trudeau's politics of division. Canadians are tired of injection mandates, proof of injection passports, business lockdowns, school lockdowns, and travel restrictions. Omicron killed the justifications for the passports. Omicron killed the pandemic. Other countries are moving on from the pandemic. Countries like Great Britain, home of our mother parliament, Ireland, Israel, and Denmark has lifted all of the restrictions. Canadians are among the most inoculated people in the world, while at the same time, some of the most locked down people. But that doesn't matter to our racialist prime minister. The left and their legacy media allies have become the boy who cried racist. A majority of Canadians believe it's time to end the restrictions. But Trudeau keeps on claiming the only way to end the pandemic restrictions is through vaccination. What does that even mean? Is Trudeau saying he won't lift federal mandates until every Canadian has gotten the shots? Because that's never going to happen. Some Canadians have chosen unemployment before having medical procedures imposed upon themselves. Some Canadians will choose prison before taking the jab. Some Canadians are choosing to risk death due to COVID before taking the shots. Many already have. Single mothers who worked from home are being fired and denied employment insurance. The socialists are cheering on these measures. 9 months ago, Trudeau said he opposed vaccine mandates. He said they were divisive. Then he called an election and discovered that playing on the fears of Canadians could let him keep his job. So Trudeau stoked that fear. He stoked that division. And now we see the result. The socialists are now calling for some Canadians to be denied medical care. This cruelty is un-Canadian. Trudeau knew this would happen, and he did it anyway, just to cling to power. Speaking of desperate bids to hang on to power, Trudeau's censorship agenda is back. To recap, Justin Trudeau has a 3-part plan to censor and control the internet. Phase 1 of his plan is to censor, tax, and control what you can watch online. In the last Parliament, this was called Bill C-10. The Liberals forced it through the House of Commons, but it died in the Senate when Trudeau called his 4th wave super spreader election. It's been resurrected and reintroduced as Bill C-11. Phase 2 of this plan is to force Facebook and Google to pay a special tax which will be entirely handed over to Trudeau's chosen legacy media outlets. This is like forcing Ford or Toyota to pay a special tax to horse and buggy makers, but only to the liberal ones. Phase 3 of Trudeau's plan to censor the internet is the so-called Online Harm Bill. Many groups across the spectrum, from librarians to left-wing social justice organizations, have warned the government that their plans risk censoring Canadians, especially minority Canadians. This week, we saw how the government plans to weaponize this law to silence people who disagree with Trudeau. The Minister for Public Safety, the man responsible for the RCMP accused a provincial politician of hate speech and demanded that Twitter remove the tweet which criticized the government. The minister is a former Crown prosecutor. The RCMP reports to him. He, of all people in Canada, should know how the law works. If you see a crime, you call the police. The police investigate, and the prosecutor can seek to put the accused on trial. Going through the legal system can be slow and takes work. So instead, the Liberals plan to introduce a system where they can accuse their critics of hate speech, then have a secret panel of bureaucrats to fine Twitter for leaving up the tweets that government does not approve of. Now, we already have laws to fight online crimes. We need to fund the police. We need more prosecutors trained in online crimes. The Liberals and their media patsies will accuse anyone who does not support their censorship agenda of being racist, just like the way they accuse anyone who does not support their mandates of being racists. Early last year, Trudeau said the mandates were a bad idea. Then just months later, he called an election to dissolve Parliament, then announced his mandate decrees. Our beloved Canada Post letter carriers were first on his hit list. Then it was the brave women and men in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now it's the truckers who bring in food for our tables. Yesterday, Johns Hopkins University researchers announced the lockdowns did little to cut deaths from COVID. Those of us who haven't had our common sense replaced by fear have known this from the outset. The study's authors recommended, quote, given the devastating effects the lockdowns have caused, they should be rejected out of hand as a policy instrument, end quote. The travesty of these cruel assaults on humanity is that the World Health Organization's policy already stated non-medical actions were not recommended for public emergencies. The fact of the matter is, every minister in this government has a manual on the steps to take in public emergencies. They all threw their books away and flew by the seats of their pants instead. Lockdowns, travel bans, COVID hotel incarcerations. It's time to end these hideous mandates. Lift the restrictions and let our citizens travel freely across borders without testing for COVID. Justin, it's time to toss the surfing trunks and put on a pair of big boy pants. Come to the Hill and tell your once adoring public you're sorry. We know you can do it. You've apologized more than any other prime minister in history. Say you're sorry. You're sorry you called them misogynists and racists. Announce that all federal injection mandates are over. Pay every federal employee put on leave and or fired what they would have received had they been allowed to work. Put the postal workers back on the job. Let our border services go back to stopping illegal guns from getting into Canada. Let our military personnel go back to defending our great nation. And don't you dare dispatch soldiers onto the street of Ottawa, pointing their guns at everyday Canadians. If you strolled through the crowd, you'd see that families with children came to stand for their freedoms to be restored. Many of them never would have otherwise come so far across their country to our nation's capital. They look in wonder at the Parliament buildings, but they're sad. They do not understand why the leader of their country, who's been given every privilege in life, has so much scorn for them. And the mandates. If you're as fed up with Trudeau as I am, please go to cherylgallant.com/fedup and download the petition to end mandates. Get 25 signatures and send it in to me. There's no postage necessary. Looking forward to receiving them. Live from Ottawa, This is Cheryl Gallant.